Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be doing a blind takeoff. Now in an ideal world, when we take off, we can see everything we're looking for, the world is nice and clear, but as you can see from my screen here, it is literally pitch black, and of course the weather conditions are less than optimum. So there's a couple different problems we're going to face here that we need to be very mindful of. The first is, that's wishful thinking visibility there, and basically this is what it's going to look like when we take off. And I've flown in conditions like this fairly recently now, and I've gotten to experience this, and I don't think I've ever been so terrified as a pilot, and flight sim is not bad. But anyway, so the big thing here is we're going to be taking off using our standard technique. There's a bunch of things we want to do to basically stack the deck in our favor. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure my heading bug is going to be facing in the direction I intend to be taking off in. That's going to be basically straight out this way. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm that this beautiful instrument, which is going to save us from death here, is properly configured. One of the things they have is this little handy-dandy little device right here where you can actually go ahead and program what the wings level on the horizon are. I'm going to confirm that that's indeed accurate. Of course, you've tested this instrument. Next thing I'm going to do is that you really want to make sure this is working properly. One of the quick and easy ways to do it in the real world is you have this alternate air switch, and when you pull it in the real world, it'll actually cause this needle to do this little happy dance. Unfortunately, it doesn't work in the flight sim, so we're at the mercy of hoping that does not break when we take off. Next thing we want to do is we want to fix with our illumination. Right now it's way too bright in here. This is kind of the default illumination. I think they're just trying to blind us a little bit here, which I get, but I just need it to be bright enough to see my instruments. I don't need it to be any brighter than that. And I think once you go past a certain point, it gets almost absurdly dangerous because it's just so bright inside the aircraft. And of course, there's always the jerk who's got to leave on the map light and everything like that. And I get that the folks who make flight sim want to make it so that they don't have to this is obviously your default. You want to be able to see when you're first going. But the reality is we want to try to keep it as dim as we can, because if something happens during takeoff, we don't want to be blinded and be basically struggling to see what we have. So this is actually a little bit better of conditions. The next item, and this is kind of an interesting item, is the fact that we need to plan for the lights to fail. And you're probably going, wait, what? What do you mean by planning for failure? Well, the big thing here is if for some reason we have an electrical failure and we can no longer see this instrument, or this instrument especially, we could potentially crash only on account of the fact that we can no longer see the instrument. We can try to rely on our senses, but as anybody knows, that vertigo is real, especially when you fly in conditions that look like this. Again, working on your IFR ticket is fun times, fun times. So what we're going to do is we're going to take off. And one of the cool things in Flight Sim is you have this little headlamp here, and it's an Alt-L on your keyboard, by the way. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn on this little headlamp. And if you do have a co-pilot in the real world, they can sit there and hold a flashlight for you. So this is a very, very short runway. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use a short takeoff technique. I'm going to make sure my flaps are in the correct position. And what we're going to do is we're going to rely on a little bit of out the window, and we're going to rely on a little bit of the directional bug that we have. Now watch how dark it's going to suddenly get. See what I mean? Now I'm using that directional bug. See how dark that is? Isn't that amazing? You just want to get in the air, don't you? All right, go ahead and use standard pull-up techniques and transfer your eyes right down to the attitude indicator. So our job now is to see several things. First of all, that we're on the correct attitude for climb. And again, we're going to memorize that little angle right there. And we're going to try to get it right around that 7 to 10 degrees there. And we're just going to kind of hold it. Go ahead and zoom out just a tiny bit here. I think this is more than enough. We're going to try to stay on that runway heading. And if you've not messed with your trim yet, this is a good time to go ahead and mess with your trim. We have more than enough altitude to go ahead and bring up our flaps. Remember, in the Cessna 172, we're going to be struggling a little bit. By the way, this is what we see out the window. It's basically black. I can't believe I can see this building. So this is what it looks like in the real world when you take off like this. And notice it just becomes a standard instrument kind of a flight condition. I doubt we would be able to see those buildings, but we're going to kind of work with what we have here. And I should have turned down the GPS as well. So again, just fly by attitude. And as you're doing this initial climb out, be looking around to go ahead and double check to see whether or not your other instruments make sense. Is your speed suddenly going up and your vertical speed going down? Something's gone wrong. Is your vertical speed suddenly fixed, even though your speed is changing? Something else has gone wrong. Is your attitude indicator turning, even though your turn rate indicator does not indicate that things are turning? Those are all warnings that something has gone wrong and that you need to address that immediately before you attempt to rely solely on that instrument. So even though our attitude indicator is our best friend here, and it's really kind of keeping us nice and steady, you have to respect the fact that at any point, any of those could fail. And if they were to fail, this is what you'd be left with. Keep in mind, this is significantly more bright than it would be in the actual plane. You would see basically pitch black. But as I mentioned, that's where we got ourselves a handy-dandy head flashlight that we could go ahead and grab onto and flip on in the event that those kind of situations happened. Now, you're probably sitting here going, wow, this is pretty scary. I don't think I want to fly in this. I agree. Not only would you be experiencing all the fun of this flight, you'd also be experiencing all the pain that is getting bounced around by the turbulence that Flight Sim does an okay job of. Now, I know you're also curious, what does it look like when you try to land in this condition? Well, you tend to get something that looks a little bit like this. As you can see, we don't really have a lot of visibility here. We're just coming on in, making our way down to the ground, hoping that that glide slope grabs onto us any second. Now, you probably see I'm about 2,500 feet here, and taking a look at the DME, I'm about 11 nautical miles out. So we got a little bit of room before we're actually going to safely get down there on the ground. But wait till you see how long it takes to actually see the ground. All right, we've got about 5 nautical miles to go. One of the bits that surprised me is I don't know how I'm able to see those things down there. Like, you just wouldn't be able to see those. It just wouldn't be possible. You know, we'd be doing our approach here, and it would just suddenly appear is really the best way to kind of describe exactly how that goes. You know, there's the bunny lights. So we spotted it at about 4 miles or so DME here. So surprisingly, as absolutely terribly miserable as it was down where we took off from, this is actually quite a bit more sane of an approach. And it's just one of those things where, like, the weather modeling, I've complained about it before, but you can definitely get a feel for it. Normally, you wouldn't even be able to see this down here. You know, you'd suddenly spot this out of kind of the gloom and the haze, and it's like, oh, we can finally put this thing down safely on the ground. Yeah, but remember, when we took off, the visibility was to about 1/10 of that. So it's actually improved in visibility, even though you can see that this visual approach would be quite intimidating, because you just see these big lines, and all of a sudden it would just sort of cut itself out of all the other distance that you can see here. So again, key things to remember is make sure you set your heading bug correctly, make sure you check your instruments constantly to make sure they're operating, and make sure you have some backup illumination. Enjoy.